Big Lez's League, an all rugby league experience. Hello, welcome back to Big Lez's League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, a Big Lez. We are back, breaking bread. It's been a little bit of a hiatus. We've been on, we've been off. Isaac's done a few solo eps, but we're both here today. We're going to get through a bunch of news. There's a little bit here to get through and a little bit of a fun topic at the end as well. So plenty to get through today. Let's get straight into it. Isaac, how are you, mate? How's the weekend been?
Yeah, it's been really good, man. It's we've obviously had a couple of weeks off, so it's good to kind of get back into the rhythm of things, which is really good. And a ton kind of going on in the footy world, as many kind of would know. A lot of on-field, like crazy on-field things going on, as well as off-field as well. And so I'm keen to kind of get stuck into a few of the big stories and a few of the lesser-known stories going around in rugby league at the moment. But yeah, keen to get stuck into it today.
How have you found doing the solo eps? Obviously something a little bit different for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I find that it's kind of it's obviously easier when it's you and me because I've got someone to bounce off and get your opinions on things as well. But it's definitely like a really cool experience just getting to kind of decide which direction the show is going to go in and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely a different experience, something that I haven't really done much of myself. Obviously, you'd have a ton more experience doing that. But I always enjoy hopping on here with you. Can kind of bounce off you and kind of get your thoughts on a few of the biggest things going on as well.
Yeah, awesome, bro. Awesome. Well, look, maybe there'll be a few opportunities for you to do a few more solo apps and stuff like that. And, I thought as well, like when I started the podcast myself, you find when you're talking, by yourself, pretty much to yourself, especially at the start when the listener thing isn't that big, you sort of get sick of your own voice a little bit because you're just like talking, by yourself for about 30 odd minutes straight. It just gets real awkward. So it's definitely like that at the start, but like the more you get into it, you sort of just fly through it and you don't really think about it too much.
Yeah, for sure. I found that as well. I found it was like, I was yapping for like half an hour, and I'm like, fire out, I'm sick of my own voice, let alone like everyone else having to listen. But thankfully, like I seem to get quite a good amount of feedback and got a few eyes on it still, and so I really appreciate everyone's kind of had to listen to me on my own, and obviously the two of us together. So it's really good stuff.
Yeah, awesome, bro. Awesome. Well, look, let's get stuck in. The first little update you've got here is about a little bit of a reconciliation.
Yeah, so probably one of the biggest stories in the last 18 months in the NRL. For many would probably know, but just as a little bit of a recap, in the NRL Vegas match in 2024, the inaugural match, there was a bit of a racial controversy between Sydney Roosters star Spencer Leniu and Brisbane Broncos star Ezra Mam. And so the situation that unfolded basically was an on-field altercation between the two, in which Leniu called Mam a racial slur. And now that slur, he called him a monkey while on the field, which caused a huge uproar in the media. Obviously, there's no room for that kind of talk in our game. And so as a result of that, he was suspended for 8 weeks, and there was a real heated altercation between the two during the match, and a lot of tension moving forward, understandably from both sides. So it's probably one of the more public kind of beefs that we've had in the NRL in recent memory. But over the last week during the State of Origin match, we had the two kind of reconcile on the field after the Queensland's win over the Blues, which was at least some sort of silver lining after a horrible State of Origin match where the Blues lost. But we got to see kind of the pair kind of reconcile. They shared an embrace on the field, and Ezra Mam spoke to the media afterwards saying it was really important for him that they kind of put that behind them, and so that he holds no kind of grudge or hard feelings towards Spencer Leniu. And so I think that's really important. Probably one of the bigger stories in the last kind of week or so, because there's so much negativity and media like controversies and stuff going around in footy nearly every single week, and so it's very rare that you get to see what's once a negative story come around full circle. And I think that's what we kind of saw with Leniu and Mam. And so obviously the pair have both been in their fair share of controversy in the last 12 to 18 months, specifically Ezra Mam, as we all know. We won't get into that. But, just to see kind of two guys show their growth and their maturity. It's something that we don't get to see very often in the NRL. We don't always get to see that kind of happy ending and that full circle moment. And so I just want to give a huge props to both Leniu and Mam for kind of burying the hatchet and doing it on a public stage and kind of showing that there is room for forgiveness in the game and in our community as well. So I thought it was a really big moment and a huge talking point moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. It's good to see those two obviously shake hands and get over what was a pretty big moment and obviously something that hurt Ezra Mam along with a lot of other Indigenous characters in the game. I think that for them to reconcile like that on a public stage, even if they were to just off field go and reconcile and just to have that level of maturity for Leniu to go over there and to make that apology as well, and for both of those guys to not take it further on the field, because that's certainly something that could have transpired. But for those two to obviously just bury the hatchet, shake hands, and then move on with their footy, I think is really big as well. And even the quote from Ezra Mam after obviously him getting booed at Manly, and everyone was saying that he took it in a different direction and wasn't really looking at it as to what it was for. I think that for Mam to come out and speak on that as well, just to have that level of maturity and go, no, look, I understand that I've done the wrong thing, and I'm looking to obviously play to the best of my ability and put it behind me and grow from it as a person and things like that. Like, it shows a real level of maturity for Ezra Mam, but I think Spencer Leniu's maturity there to obviously have that discussion with Mam after Origin as well, and for them to bury the hatchet from that side of things, I think is really powerful as well. And that's a good message to send out to the game as well. A really, really powerful message.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're obviously we're still, as an NRL community and just, the Australian community in general, obviously Ezra Mam has kind of involved himself in a pretty serious matter over the last 12 months with, a really, serious off-field incident. And I think that, we as fans are still in the process of, kind of forgiving that. And, a lot of people are kind of not too happy with maybe the punishment that Mam got for that incident. And so I think that Ezra Mam is in a position right now where he really needs to tread lightly and carefully. And honestly, like, if it would have been in his best interest to just stay out of the spotlight completely. And so for him to still kind of make that decision, that mature decision to kind of, make a public reconciliation like that could have gone any way for him. That could have been viewed as a publicity stunt. It could have been viewed as, some in some negative light, you know what I mean? And so for him to kind of come out and do that, it shows a level of sincerity that, a lot of these kind of reconciliations don't actually have, and a lot of them are just kind of for the media. And so I think that's really important to note on for Ezra Mam. As in terms of Spencer Leniu, I think as well, it's, he obviously made a mistake in calling him that slur. Like, we've got a strong Indigenous community in our game, and obviously our country as well. And there's no room for any of that chat kind of on the field, off the field, anything like that. These guys are role models, and it's really important that they kind of are careful with what they say and what they don't say. And so, no, I thought it was a really important moment between the pair. And I think a lot of players can kind of take a note out of that book. Like, there's so many players. You've got Reece Walsh, springs to mind straight away when you talk about media controversy and stuff. Like all these kind of superstar players who aren't super careful with what they say and don't say, both in the media, on the field. And so we can kind of, when people can kind of see what that full circle moment looks like for these players, it can kind of push them and motivate them to kind of think a little bit more before they act. And so, whether they meant to or not, they are kind of putting themselves in a position to be role models, not only for fans of the game, but other footy players as well. So, no, I think it's not dramatic to say it's one of the biggest talking points in the last 12 to 18 months. And while, a lot of people would disagree, if you just got to look at the magnitude of the effect that Spencer Leniu's initial comments had, and then seeing kind of the full circle moment that we've got here.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? Like, I'm not making an excuse for these two as well. Obviously, both of them, Walsh and Mam, have had things in the past that they've had to deal with off field. But I think as well, like, you've got to remember, again, not making excuses for them. They're both young guys. Like, Walsh is 22 years old, Mam's 21. They're still very young adults, with a lot of footy and a lot of life ahead of them as well. The only difference between them and myself, or, yourself, or any other 20, 21, 22-year-old out there, is that they've got a massive lens on them as well. And yes, with that comes a responsibility of, obviously, as you said, being careful with what you do, being careful with what you say, things like that. But they are just like any other 21, 22, 23-year-old, and obviously want to take risks and things like that as well. So I think people have to remember that as well. As I said, not making an excuse for anything that they've done. And obviously, man, that was a pretty grave thing that happened off field, and obviously it's fair enough that obviously fans are disgruntled by that, and the decision obviously with the suspension and things like that. Anyway, all that in the past, right? We've got to move on from that and stop kicking a dead horse. But you got to remember that these are young guys, and I think that going back to the reconciliation there, for such a young person in the game to make that decision, to make a public apology like that, again, it just shows a lot of maturity from him, and it shows a lot of growth as well post, what happened there with the racial vilification, and what happened with the, event off field as well, with the driving incident. It shows a lot of personal growth as well. And for such a young guy, I think that you can really applaud that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm keen to kind of see how the pair move forward. Because, as I said, they've both been involved in their own kind of media controversy since, like as recent as this year, like for Spencer Leniu, like he's been known to kind of blow his top a lot, and so and kind of be disrespectful at times, and so in no way am I saying either of them have shown considerable growth to the point where they're so far beyond any of this kind of behavior, but it's definitely a start. And so I'm keen to kind of see how the pair move forward in, how they carry themselves. Because honestly, it's becoming a bit of a worry in rugby league where these young guys are making so much money and they just make really stupid decisions. And it goes beyond just, guys like Leniu, Walsh, Mam. Like, you've got guys like Tyrone May, you've got guys like, Amon. Like, there's quite a few who have gotten themselves, Bronson Sherry a few years ago. There's quite a few guys who have gotten themselves in these kind of bad, positions in media when they're meant to be role models in the game. And I don't think it's dramatic to kind of put that lens on them in that situation, because they are making a lot of money, a lot more money than you and I'd make, so and with that comes a responsibility. And so I really hope this is not only a turning point for both of them, but kind of a strong lesson to the other young guys in the game who may have kind of veered in the wrong direction at times.
Yeah, 100%, bro. Well, look, it's great to see these two guys reconcile in that way, and very excited to see what happens in the future. Let's get stuck in to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of Taylan May, I had a bit of a story for Zero Tackle last week discussing one of the May brothers. It wasn't Tyrone May, it wasn't Taylan May, it was Tyrone May. And so for footy fans who've kind of been around for a little while, before we knew of Tyrone May and Taylan May, it was all Tyrone May and what he was doing over at the Penrith Panthers. So Tyrone May, the oldest brother of the Mays, is currently playing for Hull KR in the Super League, and he's been in the Super League for quite a few years. And so for those who've kind of followed, the May brothers in the NRL and kind of their, off-field interviews and stuff like that, they've all shown a real strong desire to play with each other at one point. And so we saw a few weeks ago, Taylan signed with the Tigers to obviously play alongside Terrell, which is really cool. And it's like, I love seeing kind of siblings play with each other in the NRL. And I think a lot of Tigers fans were probably thinking that Tyrone May was next on the list. He's obviously, he's only 28 years old, and he's a serviceable Super League player, if not, in the upper echelon of star players in the Super League right now. And so I think a lot of fans were kind of expecting him to join the Tigers potentially on, like a lesser deal and play maybe that utility role for the club. However, he's actually just recently re-signed with Hull KR in the Super League on a 2-year deal, which is really interesting because, you know, while he would be just a serviceable utility in the NRL, he's considered a pivotal piece of what Hull KR is building over in the Super League. And he came out and he spoke to the media and said, look, like, it was a really, really tough decision for me to kind of decide to stay here. But ultimately, I felt it was the right decision for me and my career. And I really enjoy what we're building here. And his coach kind of touched on the same thing, saying that it was really important that he stayed at the club. He helped lead them to their highest league finish ever last year, which is, super impressive because it was his first year with the club last season. So he's proved to be a real pivotal piece for Hull KR. Now, I think the interesting talking point is obviously all three brothers have really wanted to play with each other, and the fact that that's not going to happen now, I find real interesting because it makes me think that potentially, guys like Tyrone May and guys who leave the NRL to go to the Super League, they obviously have, being shown the door in some sense. No one kind of willingly goes to the Super League from the NRL unless they're not getting any contracts. And so I wonder if, there's somewhat of like a confidence issue in returning to the NRL for Tyrone May, or potentially like an ego issue where, he's viewed as this star in the Super League, and he doesn't want to return back to being that utility role in the NRL. And I think it's a real interesting dynamic because obviously Super League is regarded as the second largest rugby league comp behind the NRL in the world. And so it makes me think, is there kind of that dynamic where players are unwilling to return back to the NRL in fears of potentially being viewed as lesser than what they are in the Super League, or, just a lack of confidence that they can kind of play at an NRL level? Because I do personally think that Tyrone May can still be a serviceable NRL player. And obviously that drive to play with his brothers would have been huge. And the fact that he didn't take that up, I think is a real interesting talking point in the dynamic between the Super League and the NRL.
It's definitely an interesting talking point for sure. And I mean, you look at the Tigers roster now, right? They probably don't need a Tyrone May. So I think that probably comes into it as well. They've obviously got Latu Fainu, who they're playing in that role at the moment. Obviously going to move into the halfback jersey soon. You'd think that Heath Mason maybe moves to the bench, or Talon De Silva just takes that out-and-out 14 role. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Obviously, Talon De Silva's also leaving too, so it might have even been a really good crossover time where Talon De Silva maybe goes to a Bulldogs or a Parramatta, which is, I think, the rumour at the moment. And they obviously grab Tyrone May to hop into that 14 role. For sure, it could have been a possibility. I think the Tigers are liking what they're building at the moment, though, as well. I think that, as I said, they've got a few young kids coming through at the moment. I got hounded in the comment section the other day because I said that, getting rid of Talon De Silva was going to be a real bad decision for the Tigers. And a lot of the guys that go for the Tigers in the comment section came after me and said there's a good kid in Jersey Flag. I'm not sure as to what his name is at the moment. I have to go back and have a look at that. But they've got a real good guy coming through there as well. So I think they're just happy to build with what they've got. And I think that with the Tigers over the next few years as well, I think they're going to start to take a few leaves out of the Bulldogs books as well, and out of Penrith's book, and just developing some of their younger guys, because they have got some good juniors at the club in the moment. And the Magpies over the past 4 years have been relatively successful. So I think that they are going to just really take a leaf out of those guys' books and develop some of their younger talent, or at least I'm hoping so anyway, because they have the ability to do so with the talent that they've got in their rosters. So that's going to be interesting. But, it is still a great point and a good discussion point, I guess, regarding, are players hesitant to come back due to the fact that they're going so well in the Super League. I think Jackson Hastings is a real good example in the sense that he was going well over in the Super League as well, and he did make the decision to come back. And whether it be personality clashes and things like that, he's been in and out of starting roles, in and out of first grade as well since coming back, where, over there he was a Golden Boot winner and he was playing some really, serviceable footy. So, I think Tyrone May would have potentially looked at guys like that, and even Jake Clifford at the moment not playing first grade. He was killing it over in the Super League too as a halfback, and he's come back over. Obviously, he started out really well playing with the Cowboys, but you look at him now. He's barely making first grade, and they're looking to go in a different direction with Dearden and Purdue. So I think that there's plenty of examples of transitions that haven't worked out so well for guys like Tyrone May, halves that come back over and don't necessarily go well. So he certainly would have looked at that. Obviously, he's just won a competition as well over there in the Super League, I believe so anyway. I think he was in that side with Peter Hickey and Jared. So they've just won a comp over there. I don't think that he'd really want to leave that. I think that he probably wants to win a few more competitions over in the Super League before coming back. And, I mean, you even said it there, mate. He's 28 years old. He's got time. He can come back as a 32, 33-year-old and play 1 year out with the Tigers. Like, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue. I think that he's still got time to do it. And I think that looking at all of those factors, it's probably a big reason as to why he stayed over there in the Super League. So, I think that what you bring up in regards to ability and the ego factor of, you look at how well he's going over in the Super League, and then guys that have come back to the NRL and, been downgraded and playing reserve grade. Lewis Dodd, again, another example here, a guy that's come over from England and has played 3 first grade games since coming over. So I think that, Tyrone May would have looked at all of that and he would have gone, you know what, I've got a really good starting role here, probably decent cash as well. I'm just going to see out the next 2 years and then assess from there if I want to come back to the NRL and how much I want to play. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's actually quite concerning how many players come from the Super League and they're not getting playing time in the NRL. And it speaks to kind of the ability and the elite level that the NRL is kind of at, which is awesome. But at the same time, it is kind of a worry and could kind of deter more players from coming to the NRL from the Super League, which, it is a shame because you obviously want to get these kind of overseas players to come, to the NRL and try their hand. Obviously, Tyrone May is from Australia, but no, I think you're absolutely right. In terms of maybe of the Tigers, potentially they even just saw this as or Tyrone May as not the direction they wanted to go into. I don't see any other NRL club kind of wanting to bring him in. I could potentially see a Tyrone May heading to like a Perth Bears or a PNG side in the next couple of years. He's definitely the kind of guy I think you want in an expansion side. He's obviously got that experience in that utility role. So I definitely do see him coming back to the NRL at some point. But it is interesting that obviously his desire to play with his brothers, which is, been noted as, their biggest kind of want in their careers. His desire to play with them is not stronger than what he's kind of building in the Super League. So hats off to the Super League. Obviously their retention has gotten a lot better over the years. So and that's really exciting for them as a league and a competition. And look, I really do hope we kind of see Tyrone May return to the NRL at some point. But if not, I hope he continues killing it over in the Super League.
Yeah, 100%, bro. Totally agree, and very excited to see how he goes there, Tyrone May. Mate, it is 11:45. What do you want to do? Do you want to fly through the last one, or?
Yeah, we'll fly through the last one.
All right, cool. All right, let's get stuck in it to the last one here, mate. I've got a little bit of a fun one to end us off. What have we got?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do a bit of a rapid fire one. I'm literally going to. I'm working on a piece currently for Zero Tackle, and it's called "One Thing Holding Every Club Back from a Premiership in 2025." And so I kind of want to. I've got a few talking points for each team in the NRL. And so what I did was I essentially went to my Instagram page, Isaac Issa _journalist, and I asked my followers, what's one thing holding your club back from a premiership? So some of these are from the followers. Some of these are kind of, based on my own opinion and my viewpoint. And so I just want to kind of get your thoughts and if you agree or disagree. And so we'll just go team by team. One thing kind of holding every club back from a premiership. So Penrith Panthers are the first team I've got. And the one thing I've got holding them back is simply poached stars. They don't have the personnel and the talent anymore to kind of hold up with these other star sides that have kind of come up, like the Bulldogs and the Storm and the Raiders. I don't think fatigue is as much of an issue as people have made out because their star players are still playing at a star elite level. But I've got poached stars for our first one. Do you agree, or do you think fatigue's a bigger issue? Or
I think we've got to look at Penrith from last year and the way that they sort of went about their footy. They obviously peaked at the right time, came really good by the end of the year. I think they're going to replicate that, and I think that we're starting to see the fruits of that now with how they performed over the past 2 weeks. We're going to get some big performances from the Penrith Panthers. So for me, I disagree. I think they can still get it done.
Too easy. Next one, I think you'll have a very strong opinion on the South Sydney Rabbitohs. The biggest talking point for them is just injuries. They've just been decimated. They can't keep their stars on the field. And honestly, I think that if 2025 was probably going to be a premiership contending year for the club with Wayne Bennett coming back, but with all these injuries to the side, I just don't think it's possible. What do you think?
I'm 50-50, I think that you're right in some sense. The injuries have hurt us for sure, but once we get all these guys back, Wayne said it best in the press conference, and maybe this is a little bit of my South Sydney bias coming into fruition here, but I think that once all the stars come back and if we can keep them on the field, we're still a premiership threat. So it's just really going to be about how we end the season for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one I've got is the Tigers. Their biggest, I honestly still, it's been their issue for the past few years, but their inability to avoid controversy. They're constantly in the media, the whole Lachlan Galvin situation, this, Taruva situation, where he was kind of posting about Galvin and the bullying allegations and Terrell May wanting to throw away his New South Wales Blues jersey and all these things. I think that, they allow the media too much into their business, and it affects, I think, their on-field performances and their locker room morale. So for Tigers, I just think it's their inability to avoid controversy. What do you reckon?
Agree and disagree. I think that it's certainly hurt them at stages throughout the year, but then again, like the response that they had to the Galvin thing, and when he came back into the side, they still played good footy. Now that Galvin's gone, and they're obviously starting to find out what their side is going to look like post Galvin. If they chuck Latu Fainu into the 7 by the end of the year, I still think that they're a threat. I think that they've got a good enough forward pack to go and give them enough momentum. I like Luai more as a second receiver, so they've got to move him back into 5'8" for me. But once they do that, I still think that they're a threat. Yeah,
absolutely. Next one I've got is the Canberra Raiders. Probably the best team in the comp right now, I'd say. But I think the one thing holding them back from a premiership this year is just inexperience. Their fullback, 5'8", and hooker have a combined, match experience of just over 200 games, and over 100, 50% of those games are from their hooker in Tom Starling. So I think that they're an absolute, I think they're a premiership threat for sure. And I probably got them getting to a prelim. But I just think that, they've got so many young guys like Kale Weeks, Ethan Strange, guys like, Xavier Savage and Tomoko and all these guys. I just think that probably they don't have the experience in the class to kind of go to that level this year. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Disagree. I think that Jamal Fogarty, Josh Papali'i, obviously guys like Tarpanay as well, they've got the leadership and the experience there in those key positions to get them home for me. And look, I'd agree with you if the inexperienced guys weren't playing good footy. But KO Weeks is one of the form fullbacks in the comp at the moment. Ethan Strange is one of the form 5'8" in the comp at the moment. So I think that the Raiders will definitely be up there.
Yeah, for sure. Next one I've got, the Bulldogs. I've just got themselves, to be honest. The biggest thing holding them back from premiership this year is themselves. It's very, very few times you see a side bring in a star player who has caused as much controversy as Lachlan Galvin. And now it looks like they've kind of somewhat disrupted the playing group with Reid Marnie obviously on the outer and potentially Toby Sexton as well. And so I know they're 2-0 since Galvin has arrived, but they also haven't had their full squad. So I think that if they're not going to win a premiership this year, it's not going to be due to anything other than just, them imploding from the inside because they've just gotten a little bit too trigger happy. What do you think?
I agree. I think they're one of the favourites to win the comp still. I think that they've grown so much from last year's final series. I think that this is sort of a minor inconvenience for them. I think that this reasoning compared to others for other clubs is quite insignificant. So I think that they're still relatively high in the premiership discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing holding them back, and they're still the favourites for me as well. Next I've got is the Gold Coast Titans. The biggest thing holding them back from a premiership is rugby league. They just can't play rugby league. They have one of the better forward packs in the competition. They've got a premiership winning coach. They've got one of the best spines on paper in the competition. There is absolutely no reason why the Titans are not a top 8 side, potentially a top 4 threat. They've got, on paper, such an impressive side. And I think it's just because the Titans have an inability to play successful rugby league. They've got all the pieces there and they just can't put it together. What do you think?
I think that they've tried so many variations of footy this season and even in past seasons where it's just really imploded on them. I think that obviously looking at Foz in the side versus Foz out of the side, you can see a key difference there. I think that they've got to give Kieran Foran the keys. JC needs to go back to 6 for me. AJ is probably the best fullback at the club. Where does that leave Keanu Kinney? I'm not too sure. Is that a big statement? Probably. But I think it's the truth at the end of the day. AJ has played some pretty good footy at fullback. He is still probably, in my opinion, the best fullback at the club over Kinney. Even though Kinney's unbelievable, AJ's still got it for me. So they've got a ton to figure out. Plus, they've got Sam Stevenson, Jalen de Groot sitting on the sidelines as well. Keanu Kinney still to come back. They've got 5 odd fullbacks at the club at the moment that they've got to fit in at some point in the future. Zane Harrison's a really good half as well that they've got coming through. What's the plan for him? Are they going to go for this 2 fullback half pairing? Post Foz, are they going to try and get a halfback? For me, they need a halfback at the club. And it's probably the big thing that's holding them back, actually. Rather than what you were sort of saying there in the ability to play footy, I think that's off the back of not having an actual halfback at the side.
Yeah, fair enough. The next one I've got for the Brisbane Broncos is morale at the moment. I just think morale is really low at the club. Obviously, they've been involved with a lot of controversy, some of which we've already kind of touched on earlier in the episode. But I think that between Michael Maguire's real hard-nosed approach and some of these guys' inability to kind of take that, obviously we just had Marty Tapau get sacked from the club. Selwyn Cobbo's on the outer now. I think the morale is just not great in Brisbane right now. And so I think if they can figure that out, they're definitely a premiership threat. But right now, I think morale is holding them back.
Would have agreed with you 2 weeks ago, but what they've just done over the past 2 weeks with Walsh coming back into the side and the footy that they're playing at the moment, they seem to be playing some pretty damn good footy for a side that has some poor morale. I think that there's certainly still a little bit of, I guess, pushback on the way that Madge coaches and things like that and a little bit of unrest. But I think that the fruits of Madge's labour and the impact of his coaching is slowly starting to rub off on a few of those key guys, and they're slowly buying into what he's trying to build there. And to be honest, you've got Melbourne probably is the favourite. Melbourne is the favourite. Canberra, Dogs. Broncos are the 4th favourite for the premiership for me. I think if they can get everything right and everything clicks, they'll be right up there for me. So I think that Broncos are a real premiership threat this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if they can kind of keep it up, I definitely have them as a premiership threat. And I think that they probably got the best side on paper in the entire comp, to be honest. For my 8th spot, I've got the Parramatta Eels, and I think it's just they're halves at the moment. I think that's the biggest talking point. For the second year, Moses has gone down to an injury in Origin. We won't have him back for 6 weeks. Dylan Brown has been signed on a $13 million contract and has not played worth even maybe half of that. Still very good 5'8", but absolutely not playing to the superstar level to what I think Knights fans are hoping he does. So, and now obviously they're playing with a halves pairing of Dean Hawkins and Josh Papali'i, one that I really like, but obviously not one that can win a premiership. And so I don't know, by the time finals comes around, does Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses have it in them to take it to another year if they made the finals? I don't think so.
I think that people look at the footy that they've played together this year, Moses and Brown. They haven't played a full season together since they've become a halves pairing. Whether it's been Brown off-field incidents, whether it's been Moses injury, whether it's all different things, right? They haven't played a full season together since they've become a halves pairing, which is just wild. The only other halves pairing that's in this situation is actually Melbourne with Jerome Hughes and Munster. Jerome Hughes has been injured quite a bit. Munster, obviously, with the hip thing, even like the entire spine for Melbourne, Harry Grant injuries in Origin and Paps injuries. They haven't played a full season together either, from round 1 to 27. So I think that you've got to look at as well. Having the time to really develop a crisp halves pairing takes a long time, and when there's a lot of inconsistency with that, it does become quite hard. And I think that will sort of delve into it a little bit. They're in a real interesting spot, aren't they, in regards to, obviously they want to win a premiership or they want to fight for the top 8 this year after a really disappointing year last year. But also they are sort of keeping one eye on the future in regards to who the next guy up after Dylan Brown is going to be. So what are they going to prioritise? And it depends on how far they are up the ladder by, I guess, round, let's say, 19, 20. So not too long in the future. That's sort of going to give you a real rough idea as to what they're going to really open the lens to as we end the season. So, yeah, look, I think that the footy that the two halves have played together has been a massive part of where they're currently sitting, and I don't think they can win a premiership without Moses. I don't think they can make the 8 without Moses, so that's obviously going to do a little bit for it there. But what I will say is Yongi has come so far in his first year of first grade, from where he was at the start of the year to where he is now. That would give you a lot of confidence as a Parramatta fan with how well Josh Papali'i looked last night as well, playing in there at number 6. Will give you a lot of confidence. Dean Hawkins, holy crap, since going to Parramatta, the 2 games he's had have been outstanding. 4 tries just in the first one. I think he had two or 3 the other night as well. Just really, really good signs for the future for Parramatta. But in regards to this year, they're certainly not a premiership threat for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one I've got is for the Dolphins, who have probably been the most impressive team over the last month, I'd say. I just think for the Dolphins, what's holding them back from a premiership, if there is something, it's just the post-Wayne Bennett effect. Now, they've obviously really clicked into gear over the last month, but if they were to make finals, not having Wayne Bennett there, I think could potentially hold them back because otherwise I really like what they're building. To a lesser degree, if we touched on one thing holding them back, I'd also say injuries, because obviously they've got a bit of an injury cloud going on at the moment. But I think the biggest thing would probably be the post-Wayne Bennett effect.
So the Dolphins actually have 4 players out for the season now. They've got Plath, Dan Saifidi, Gilbert, and then Bostock as well over the weekend. It looks like he's done his ACL. So they've got 4 players out for the season, which is just absolutely wild. In saying all that, I think they could be a top 4 side by the end of the year. If Katoa really starts to click into gear, they've obviously got Farnworth and Avarillo still there. They've got a really, really good winger. I don't know his name, but I spoke to Nath, Rugby League Guru, about it the other day, and he's posted about it as well. Tavita Nafar, he's a really, really good winger. Obviously, and this will be a nice little chat as well. Selwyn Cobbo, the situation with him and his contract, do they let him go a little bit early, the Broncos, and he goes over to the Dolphins and sits on that left wing? That would be interesting as well. But yeah, I think that certainly injuries will be the big thing. If they don't get there, injuries will be certainly a thing we look back on. In saying that, I think that they're so far ahead of that now. Jeremy Marshall-King's back. They've got Isaiah Katoa playing great footy. Cody Nikorima is playing good footy. Hammer's playing good footy. Herbie hasn't missed it. I think he's missed 2 tackles all year, and he's playing lights out attacking football. I think that they're a top 4 side, and I think they can be a top 4 side still with all these injuries by the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree completely. Then I've got Melbourne Storm, who are my premiership favourite at the moment, if it's not the Bulldogs. I think for the Storm, it's just fatigue. If anything's going to hold them back, it's simply fatigue, because they've got the class across the field, and they've just been up for so long. It's never been a major issue for them, but honestly, I struggled to find anything else that could hold them back. So if anything's going to hold them back from a premiership, I'm probably just going to say that it's fatigue.
I think they have the biggest poker face on right now. It's crazy. They're playing, really average footy. There's a lot of errors. They're winning games really, really closely. I think that they're going to take a lot of notes from what Penrith did last year, and they're going to peak right at the right time. come finals, they're going to look like a completely different side, in my opinion. And they're really going to come out strong and blow a lot of teams off the park, and they're going to be in that grand final for me. So, I honestly think they're holding up a very big poker face at the moment, and they're winning games tight. You know, they're not playing really Melbourne Storm-like footy, but I think that's all because they're waiting to that right point of the season, come finals, and they're going to blow teams off the park. So I think that Melbourne are definitely going to be a watch. I think by round 23, 24, we'll start to see them blow teams off the park and really lead strong into the back end of the year and going into finals. I don't think minor premiership's going to be a big thought process for them. I don't think they're going to be going for first on the ladder. I don't think they give a fuck about that, to be honest. They got it last year and didn't win the comp. Their thought process is going to be grand final and winning it in a big way against whoever goes against them, whether it be Penrith again, whether it be the Dogs, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Broncos. These sort of sides, I think that they are going to get there. And as I said, the poker face is on now, but it won't become the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Then I've got the Dragons. Look, it was really easy for me to just say lack of personnel. And while I do think that's a factor, they do have quite a few big names, which draws me to what I do think will be something holding them back from a premiership. And that's just age. They've got stars across the board, but like Valentine Holmes, Damien Cook, Clint Gutherson, but they are obviously in the twilight of their careers. While they're all still serviceable and great players, I don't think that they are. If you had these three guys 5 years ago, I think that you win the premiership and you're the favourites. But I just think that all three are kind of past their prime. And I probably, if you're relying on them to get you across the board, I don't know if they've got the miles in their legs left to kind of compete with guys like the Storm, the Dogs, the Canberra Raiders, and the like.
I don't think they're going to win a premiership with Kyle Flanagan at halfback, is my thing. I think that they've got Ilias. The Dragons have won 8 games in a row in New South Wales Cup. Ilias has been a big part of that. He's got he's had at least 2 to 3 try assists in all of those games. They're really ignoring that at the moment. There's got to be a point, and I know it's going to be hard because when you obviously have your son playing in your team, and it's obviously very hard to keep him out of the side, right? I think that there's got to be a point where Shane just doesn't look at Kyle Flanagan as his son and looks at him as a player in his roster that isn't playing the best footy at the moment, and pulls him out. And they put in Lockie Ilias, who is playing some really good footy, had a really good combination with Lycan King Tonga before he got pulled into first grade as well. Tonga's the future. I don't think he's the issue either. I think that he's been playing good footy. I think it really is the fact that they need an Ilias in there with a decent kicking game. He's been playing really good footy in New South Wales Cup. You've got to bring him in. I think that you've got to at least give it a go. Flanagan, I think will move and come next year into a utility role. I don't think he'll be in the halves at all. I think that he'll go into a hooker, lock forward sort of role. They'll put a few kilos on him. I don't think that they're going to win a comp with Flanagan there, unfortunately, because he just doesn't have the tools for me. Kicking game's okay, but the direction that they get isn't at the quality of what they need to be a successful outfit. I just think that overall they're a bit too inconsistent to be a premiership threat for me this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm just having a look at the time, so I've got to duck off in a bit. So I'm going to go through the rest of these ones fairly quickly.
Yeah, I'll just go yes or no.
But next up, I've got the Manly Seagulls. And their biggest thing is just Tom Trbojevich's health. He's obviously been moved to centre now. I'll be keen to kind of see how that kind of works. But I think that a premiership doesn't come to Manly without Tom Trbojevic as your fullback and him fit and firing. So I've got that next. Then after that, I've got the New Zealand Warriors. And I think their biggest issue would just be peaking maybe a little bit too soon. We obviously saw them go down to the Panthers over the weekend. And I worry that they play their best footy a little bit too soon. We spoke about the Storm and obviously them peaking at the right time. And I fear that the Warriors might just hit that tip of the mountain a little bit too soon. Next, I've got for the Knights, it's Adam O'Brien. I don't think he's a good coach. And I think that the decisions he's kind of been making as a coach have just made no sense to me. And so I probably think he's the biggest kind of thing holding them back. I don't think you win a premiership with Adam O'Brien as your coach. For the Sydney Roosters, I've just got Sam Walker's health. I don't think you win a premiership without Sam Walker being healthy. So if he can kind of get back in a rhythm before finals footy, if they do make finals, I do think that they can kind of be in a good position to move forward. And then for the Sharkies, I've just got inconsistency. And, they've obviously hit the highest heights, but they've also hit pretty low lows as well. And so I don't think that they've been able to kind of get that consistent level of footy that probably a lot of people have been hoping for. What do you think?
Yeah, mate, I'm still thinking about that Adam O'Brien take. That's rough.
No, not a fan.
Oh, mate, he's a guy that's gotten them into finals pretty much every year that he's been coaching. I wouldn't say that he's a bad coach. I think that some decisions of late have been poor. I think that not playing Jackson Hastings has been a pretty poor decision. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's going to rub a lot of Newcastle fans the wrong way. I think Dan Nilso is going to be after you, mate. But yeah, look, I certainly think that there's some decisions that he's made that have held him back. In regards to the Warriors, I somewhat agree. I think they're playing some really good footy now, but what's that going to look like come finals time?
Yeah.
I can definitely get around that. I actually disagree with the Manly take. I think that they can win a premiership with Lehigh there. I think that he's a real good player. If they throw Tom Travojevic into the centres and they can get anywhere close to what we saw from him in the World Cup there, and then just having Lehigh out the back, I think that they can definitely be a real threat. I don't think they're going to win a premiership this year. I think it's going to be next year, the year after.
Yeah.
But I think that they can do it with Lehigh at fullback. He's a real talent and a bit of a future lens there for me for the Manly Seagulls. But I can get around a lot of the other takes that you said there though as well, mate. I am conscious of time, and obviously you've got to shoot off to your next thing. Anything coming up for you over the next few weeks on the socials?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Look, we're always kind of, there's been massive growth over on the socials. If you head over to Isaac _journalist, we're obviously always covering the biggest things in footy. And obviously a lot of my work with Zero Tackle as well. I'm on there every week kind of popping through like the biggest stories in rugby league and stuff. So if you're keen to kind of get a, deeper insight into what I do, just head over to the Instagram. And you'll kind of just see everything that I've been kind of publishing and working on, but a lot of exciting things kind of coming up at the moment.
Awesome, mate, and congratulations on 1,000 followers too. I saw you you popped over the 1,000 mark as well.
Thank you.
Congratulations, mate, and hopefully plenty more to come your way. Guys, make sure to go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube, become a part of the big LEZ'S League community, and get plenty more content like this. We'll see you guys in the next one.